At 12:31 p.m. local time on July 17, 2014, Malaysia Airlines Flight MH17 took off from runway 36C Schiphol Airport, Amsterdam. Its destination was Kuala Lumpur International Airport, carrying 23 passengers and 15 crew members. The flight represented a cross-section of the world, with individuals from various countries coming together for diverse reasons: holidays, business trips, and family visits. It first crossed Germany and Poland until it reached the Ukrainian airspace. There was a significant storm situated right over MH17's planned path through southern Ukraine. They requested to deviate 20 nautical miles north via radio. The pilot also wanted permission to climb 1,000 feet, which was denied by the Air Traffic Control Center. But the permission to change course by 20 nautical miles north was given. The flight then navigated 6.5 miles off the original path in order to avoid storm, and later returned to the original path, and then received clearance to head to the Air Navigation Waypoint (RND). This clearance would be the last radio message MH17 would receive. At about 4:20 p.m. local time, MH17 crashed without any warnings whatsoever.
You have video from the moment the plane crashed. We're seeing this now for the first time. Let's take a look.
Phil, you're at that crash scene. Tell us what you're seeing right now as the sun is coming out.
Pieces of fuselage need to be cut into smaller sections before they can be taken away. The work is being done by local employees of the Ministry of Emergencies.
The crash of Malaysia Airlines Flight MH17 occurred in the Donetsk region of eastern Ukraine. Geographically, this area is situated in the eastern part of Ukraine, near its border with Russia. This area at that time was a contested area due to political and ethnic tensions that escalated significantly in 2014. Separatist groups supported by Russia had been planning to secede from Ukraine. The separatists backed by Russia declared their control over the contested territories of Donetsk and Luhansk. These proclamations marked a significant escalation in the conflict, as these regions are strategically important and have deep historical and cultural ties with Russia. This act of declaring control not only intensified the conflict but also deepened the geopolitical rift in the region. The crash site was located in an area controlled by Russian separatists. The OSCE was among the first international bodies to respond to the MH17 crash. They provided an essential on-ground presence in the immediate aftermath. They were already in the conflict zone for covering the war. However, the separatists controlling the area only granted them limited access to the crash site. There were widespread concerns about the integrity of the crash site.
Right now, this is our second day here. We're looking at a very, very badly damaged piece of earth where it looks like where the...
Reports suggested that the wreckage and victims' belongings had been disturbed or tampered with before investigators could properly secure and examine the site.
So it's been 4 days since the plane was brought down, and let me show you something that I just found. This is a disused poultry farm, and look what that is. That is one of the wings of flight MH17.
There was a growing worry and emphasis by both Malaysia and Netherlands to complete the investigation before the onset of winter. On November 8, 2014, Dutch experts returned to the crash site to recover the remaining bodies and belongings. This effort was part of the ongoing investigation and recovery process, hampered by the unstable security situation in the region due to the ongoing conflict. In February 2015, more body parts and personal belongings that were found by locals were recovered by the Dutch police. On May 2, 2015, a Dutch Hercules C-130 aircraft landed at the Eindhoven airport in the Netherlands.
A measure of comfort today for a group of people whose hearts may never fully heal. The families of the people who died last week when a plane was shot out of the sky now know at least some of the bodies are home in the Netherlands and no longer in a field in a war zone.
Under international aviation agreements, specifically the Convention on International Civil Aviation, also known as the Chicago Convention, the responsibility of the investigation crash typically falls onto the country where the crash occurred. In the case of Malaysia Airlines Flight MH17, which was shot down over eastern Ukraine, this would mean that Ukraine was initially responsible for leading the investigation. However, international agreements also allow for the country where the aircraft was registered, in this case Malaysia, or countries that had a significant number of citizens on the flight, to be heavily involved in the investigation. The Dutch Safety Board became responsible for finding out the cause of the crash. The two most important parts of the investigation would be the cockpit recorder and flight data recorder, the FDR. The cockpit voice recorder from Flight MH17 were first missing and were removed by unknown individuals, but later handed over to Dutch investigators and without any indications of manipulation. The flight data recorders record numerous flight parameters such as altitude, airspeed, engine performance, and more. But shockingly, the data neither indicated anything out of ordinary nor did it show any warnings about the flight. It showed that the flight consistently flew at 33,000 feet when all of a sudden the recordings break off. No alarm is recorded and nothing that hints at aircraft malfunction of any source. The cockpit audio recorder also stops recording at the same times as data recorder. The cockpit voice recorder captures 4 audio channels from different microphones that are placed inside the cockpit. Nothing unusual is heard or shown in the voice recorder, but on closer inspection, something strange and of interest appears on the voice recording graph. 2 sound peaks can be seen within the last 20 milliseconds before the recording comes to a complete stop. The investigators also took multiple photographs of the wreckage and reconstructed the frontal part of the aircraft using the wreckage and a similar chassis. Videos taken by the media and investigators were also examined to look for anything that might help the investigation. The reconstruction was done by placing the parts found on a Boeing 777 frame to visualize and examine the breaking points. One thing that was immediately noticeable was the existence of many perforation holes on the frontal part of the plane. These puncture holes suggested a high-velocity impact from a large number of fragments. This kind of damage is typical of a missile strike. The missile detonated just outside and above the left-hand side of the cockpit. This was determined by pattern of damage observed on the wreckage and distribution of shrapnel and missile fragments found. The explosion would have instantly killed the crew in the cockpit due to the shrapnel penetration. The blast likely caused a catastrophic damage to the aircraft's structural integrity, particularly the cockpit and the forward part of the plane. This catastrophic damage likely resulted the aircraft being apart in mid-air. The 2 voice peaks were further investigated, which showed that the first peak was only recorded by the cockpit microphone channel and not by other 3 channels. This means this could have merely been a static energy peak. However, the second peak was recorded by all other microphones as well, which on further investigation shows that it was from the missile's impact hitting and eventually recorded by microphones one by one. The investigators now started to narrow down their search for exactly what missile was used to attack the plane. They found out that only 3 systems leave behind such fragment patterns as found in the wreckage. These 3 types were a square fragment, a circular fragment, and a distinct bow-type shaped fragment. It is the bow-type shaped fragment that exactly matches that of the fragments found on the MH17 wreckage, mainly found in the cockpit area. A data cable which is used to stabilize fins of the missiles were also recovered from the wreckage. Also, a part of such a side fin was found, as well as the rear engine nozzle of the missile was found on the ground near the wreckage site.
Flight MH17 crashed because of a 9N314M warhead detonated outside the aeroplane above the left side of the cockpit.
It's important to note that the Dutch Safety Board's role was not to assign blame or establish criminal responsibility, and potentially bringing charges against those responsible for downing of the MH17 was handled separately by the Joint Investigation Team. The JIT, which included representatives from the Netherlands, Australia, Belgium, Malaysia, and Ukraine, was specifically formed to conduct a criminal investigation into the incident. Their goal was to gather evidence that could be used in legal proceedings. 3 agencies were involved in finding out the perpetrators of the attack: the Royal Netherlands Aerospace Center, Kiev Institute for Forensic Expertise from Ukraine, and a Russian entity, the arms industry company Almaz Anti. All 3 agencies came up with the areas that were spot where missile was fired from. These areas were in extreme close proximity and were controlled by Russian separatist groups. Although the Russian group's final conclusions are similar to the other 2 agencies, the final report of the Russian government is contradictory and denies the missile to be of Russian origin. The Russian government requested that the final report shall not include findings of the Russian company, but this request was rejected by Dutch investigators. The downing of Malaysia Airlines Flight MH17 in July 2014 did lead to a significant strain in relations between the Russian government and the Dutch authorities, as well as with other Western governments. This was one of the biggest investigations done by the Dutch government, with involvement of over 200 investigators on the case. Not only those, but a lot of independent journalists were also simultaneously working on this case and making information available to the public. Of these journalists were a group of journalists who go by the name of Bellingcat, played a significant role in the investigation of the Malaysia Airlines Flight MH17 crash. Bellingcat's major contribution was in tracking the movement of the missile system. They analyzed various images and videos posted online, which showed a missile system being transported through eastern Ukraine on the day of the crash. They came up with proof and theory that the missile was launched from a Russian-backed separatist area, a town called Snizhne. The investigators also intercepted many phone calls and identified individuals directly responsible for the shootdown of the plane.
As we know, it was a booked missile from the 9M38 series.
But the chances of bringing them to justice are very slim. There were in total 4 individuals named as main suspects. The court proceedings for this case began on March 9, 2020 in The Hague, Netherlands. The trial started more than 5 years after the incident, which were tried in absentia as none of them appeared in court. One of the defendants, Oleg Pulatov, was represented by 2 lawyers, while the other 3 chose not to attend or send legal representation. The trial was conducted under Dutch law due to the majority of the victims being from the Netherlands and the inability to establish an international tribunal because of Russia's veto in the United Nations Security Council. government of Netherlands, together with the government of Australia, initiated a legal proceeding against Russia with the aim that the ICAO should condemn the Russia for hiding the truth and not taking responsibility of the crash.